injuries.
Oh my God!
The lethal drive ended here when the attacker crashed into Parliament's railings.
Just outside Westminster Underground Station, when I heard an almighty crash and a vehicle looked like a 4x4 I could see on the opposite side of the road had crashed into the railings. There was smoke coming from underneath the bonnet of this vehicle. I walked on a few paces further and saw what I assumed to be either a pedestrian or a cyclist who'd clearly been hit and wasn't moving, although he did then gently move for a couple of seconds. The guy who I assume was the driver of this 4x4 got out of the car and suddenly sprinted away from the scene.
Armed with 2 knives, he forced his way into New Palace Yard, fatally stabbing an unarmed police constable. Armed officers shot the attacker, bringing him down yards from his victim and keeping their guns trained on him, even as he was treated. He was lifted onto a stretcher and on the ground circled here in red, his 2 knives. The emergency services scrambled, specialist firearms units following well-rehearsed plans for a terrorist attack. And an air ambulance joined the dozens of paramedics already on the ground. Inside the palace grounds, they battled to save P.C. Palmer. A member of the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command, the 48-year-old was a married father with 15 years service. Among the first to respond, Conservative MP Bias Elwood, who administered CPR in vain. Today, an emotional tribute was paid to P.C. Palmer by his friend James Cleverly. The 2 men had served in the army together.
P.C. Keith Palmer, who I first met 25 years ago as Gunner Keith Palmer at Headquarters Battery 100 Regiment, Royal Artillery. He was a strong, professional public servant. And it was a delight to meet him here again, only a few months after being elected. Would my right honourable friend the Prime Minister, in recognition of the work that he did and the other police officers and public servants here in the House do, consider recognising his gallantry and sacrifice formally with a posthumous recognition? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yet less than 24 hours ago, the very same chamber had been packed for Prime Minister's questions.
I am now going to suspend the sitting of the House. This House is now suspended, but please wait here.
Outside the chamber, but still inside the building, the Prime Minister herself, who was immediately evacuated.
We were voting at the time. And I remember one of the MPs running in and shouting, "Has anybody seen the Prime Minister?" Because the Prime Minister had been voting in that particular division. I'd seen the Prime Minister go through, so I was able to tell him that the Prime Minister's already gone through. He was able then...
people were looking for her?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, to make sure that she was safe.
MPs and staff remained locked down and moved to Westminster Hall. Outside, the London Eye stopped turning. Tourists trapped with a view of the carnage below. And while they waited, a group of visiting school children were released, having been entertained with cartoons in an MP's office as the drama outside played out. When MPs were finally allowed to leave, there was relief and gratitude.
There were armed police officers outside the chamber in parts of the building, and they were doing a very, very professional job. Look, the tragic truth is this is the day that we have feared would come at some point, and it has. It's why the Security and Intelligence Services have said for a long time an attack is highly likely. And I think the single most important thing is, obviously we mourn for those who have lost their lives, for the injured, for their families. For them it is an absolutely awful, awful day. But I think for Parliament, for our society, the most important thing we can do is to show that we are not going to be defeated. We are not going to give up our way of life. We are not going to give up our democracy. We're going to carry on doing what we're doing, because that is what those who undertake these attacks want to try and make happen, and we're not going to let it happen.
We've always known there could be a lunatic who does something like this, but I mean,
it's quite shocking when it actually happens, but I've had nothing but praise for the authorities for the way they handle it.
Both houses of Parliament will carry on today in a show of defiance, but there will be an increased police presence in London and in cities across the country in the coming days. In Paris, the lights went out on the Eiffel Tower in a show of solidarity from a nation that has recent dreadful experience of similar terrorist attacks. Last July, 86 people were killed when a lorry ploughed through crowds celebrating Bastille Day. And in December, 12 people died when a truck drove through a Berlin Christmas market. Last weekend, there was a full security exercise in London, but this attack demonstrates that defending the public against a lone attacker armed only with a vehicle is a difficult, perhaps impossible task. Westminster Bridge has now reopened, an attempt to restore the capital to some degree of normality. The stains are simply washed away, easy to remove, but not so for the many who witnessed the horror. They will wish they can do the same.
As night falls here in Trafalgar Square, Londoners continuing to mill around behind me, reluctant to leave, chatting amongst themselves, talking about what happened yesterday, but we heard from the Mayor of London saying that this